Hey, hello, and welcome back. You're going to be seeing us tonight. It's not going to be live because there's some connectivity issues with Facebook tonight. We tried 3 different devices, and it's just not letting us do it live. Tonight I'm going to be talking a little bit about credit and debt. And if you have any questions, so tonight, like I said, it's not going to be interactive. I do have some people in the room. If they want to ask questions, they can. And if they have questions, they can interject here and there, and I'll leave some room for that. And if you have questions, just go ahead and type it up. And then the next class on the 29th, I'll answer those questions, because this is a big issue, credit and debt, from a biblical point of view. And just to whet your interest, the next time we talk, depending on how many questions we have, I plan to show you how to use credit in order to get, free stuff. Go on vacation for free, pay for Christmas for free, and it's all 100% legal. It's interesting. I was studying for the credit tonight and debt class. Boy, I was researching some things. There's a guy online who does the same exact thing I do, and he makes a whole lot more money than I do because he goes to the nth degree with it. He is a Christian and a wonderful guy, and so we'll be sharing some of those thoughts along with my thoughts next week. Not next week, 2 weeks from now. But you really enjoy it, whether you want to go on vacation. It's like, I like to go on vacation of my dreams. You can. And we're going to show you how to do that, and some of the common mistakes when you try to go on a trip that can save you a lot of money and things like that. And also coming up, Christmas is coming up soon. You'd love to free up some free money for that. Hopefully you're trying the one little simple thing I have for saving money we talked about last time. And just saving a couple pennies can save you up to a couple $100 a year. Remember last week I showed you how I could save $268 a year just by rounding up my change. So last week we talked about budgeting, and hopefully you're working on a budget. In November I plan to do a class. I talked to you about some of those budgeting programs that are online, and I'm going to take one of them, and we're going to probably the second class in November, and we're probably going to take it, and we're going to have sitting at a desk, and I'll walk you through how to make accounts, how to put your money in places so every dollar is accounted for. And remember, there's 2 things people miss in budgeting. Number one, you should always plan for the unexpected. Last time, I talked to you about there's always something going to happen. I put something online as a comment. Maybe you didn't see it. One of the funds I have is a medical fund, and not that I ever want to get sick or you ever want to get sick, but it's something that at some point in life you may need to go to an emergency room or to go see a doctor or have to have a medication. We all have those moments in life, and so what I do is out of every check I get, I put $12.50 into a medical fund. That might not sound like a lot of money. That's only $50 a month, and in the year it's $600. Well, the average person doesn't typically go to the hospital every year, and so it built. So I let that always build up. So whenever I have a bill, I'm able to help with that. And sometimes I get a bigger bill. One time I got a big bill and I had to pay for it. And we're going to talk about another one tonight. But you know what? So I was able to pay off the beginning part, and then I just went on a payment plan with the hospital, and I paid off. I said I could do $50 a month, which I was already saving $50 a month, so it didn't affect my survivor fund or my basic needs fund, and I was able to go on living the way I always lived because I was always putting that $12.50 back for a medical need. So it's good to budget that in. And the second thing that people miss when they budget is that they don't account for everything included in a thing. Like last time we talked about buying a car. When you buy a car, the car salesman can tell you can afford this, or you're buying a house. You can afford this much of a house. Yeah, you can based on what they say on the paper there, but remember, they're trying to get you to spend as much money as possible. And when it comes to let's go to a house this time. I did a car last time. When you think of a house, you got to imagine once you buy a house, something's always going to break. So you always got to thinking about, hey, I gotta have money for that. There's going to be insurance for the house. Hey, that's a part of the cost of the house, and things like that. Different things you're going to have that might come into the house. How much is the electric bill going to be? How much is the taxes going to be in the neighborhood you're living into? So you can figure out exactly what the whole cost of the house is, so you don't say, I can afford this, and you get these other costs that come around and go, boy, I really can't afford that. So you don't stress out about a large purchase. Well, tonight, so before I go on, anybody have any questions about that in the room? Okay, pretty simple stuff. But tonight we're going to talk about, a lot of people have asked on the site and have asked me about credit and debt over the years. And this is something we need to address because 90% of all Americans have some type of debt, some type of credit issue. And because it's be 100% honest, it's really easy to get into trouble with those things because sometimes it feels like, oh yeah, I can handle it. It's free money, but it's not free money. And you might handle your debt well, and you might not, and that's okay. Hey, you can share somebody. You're probably somebody in life you knows who always is asking for money or needs money. And they need to handle this better. So this can apply to a lot of people. And so before we talk about it, I want to talk about some biblical things behind that. Does the Bible say that it is a sin to borrow money? No, it doesn't say it's a sin to borrow money. A lot of people try to say that, and it's good if you can live a debt-free lifestyle. It's a wonderful thing to do. But it doesn't say it's a sin to borrow money, but it does talk about the warnings. He warns you that if you do borrow money, things could happen. You're a servant to the lender. You have to pay back, or consequences that can happen. But it never says you're out of God's will by doing it, because sometimes there'll be a time where you need to borrow money for something. And there's good debts and bad debts, and we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. But the Bible also says it isn't wise to borrow money. It's not a sin. You can borrow money, but if you can avoid doing that, you should try to. Now, some people in this day and age, you'll hear a lot of investment things out there. You should invest your money here, or it's okay to go into debt as long as you make money. And it's great, but remember, God gave you a brain. Don't get sucked into to people who talk too fast. Let's put for one type of thing. Because there's possibility to have good debt to make money, but sometimes if we don't use our brain, we don't take everything into account. And that could be a bad thing as well. Nowhere in scriptures are we advised or commanded to use debt as a reason to accomplish God-given goals. He wants you to use your brain to do different things. He doesn't say, hey, go do this and get into debt on purpose just because it's the easy way out. Sometimes doing it a little bit longer or taking some more steps to it is better for us in the long run because it's less stressful and things like that. And also, it doesn't say in the Bible that God will ever bail you out of debt. Now, there's a wonderful verse, Philippians 4:19. And my God will supply all your needs according to his riches and glory in Christ Jesus. It's a great verse. And absolutely, God will always provide for your needs as long as you're what? Following what he asks you to do. You got to be in his will. You got to be doing the right things. God never says he'll bail you out of unwise decisions. Will he help you get out of it? Yes. But you know what? He wants us to make good choices. He gave us brains to make good choices. He hasn't pledged himself to cancel out the consequences of our unwise behavior. So we need to, before we ever go into debt or borrow money, we need to, first of all, what's it say in the Gospels? Many times Jesus says what? Count the cost. It's not just about going out and winning the gospel. It's about how to live your life. Count the cost before you do anything to make sure you don't get yourself in trouble on your own. And it doesn't say debt is ever an exercise of faith. I'm exercising faith, so I'm borrowing money, believing God will be there for me. Well, if that was true, then God wouldn't have all these verses about borrowing money. He wouldn't say, be careful who you lend to. He wouldn't have all this advice for that. A lot of times, sometimes we want something, and what we do is we put the lender in place of God's faithfulness. Like I said, there are times where debt and credit is a good thing. A lot of times it's a bad thing. But you know what? We got to use our brains about that, because sometimes we want to fulfill the desire of our heart, and then you know what? We get ourselves in a situation that we really should have got to in the first place, saying, well, I'm just stepping out in faith. Well, God never told you to step out in faith in a place where you're getting punished for that by somebody else who's taking money from you in forms of interest and things like that, when you didn't have to do that in the first place, when there might have been a better time. Because remember, things, as much as we like things can never satisfy the love that you need in your heart. Things can never buy love from somebody else. Just like a kid, they get a toy to play for a while, and then they kind of put it on the shelf. We adults, we buy things, we use it for a while, and then sometimes we forget about it. And then we're paying on it, and we're not even using it to the ability. Or sometimes we buy things because we want it beyond our means, and maybe it's not the time of your life for it. An example would be I want to buy the car of my dreams. Okay, that's great. There's a time in life for that, and there's not a time. If you buy it when you're not in a financial place to do that, well, and you have, what happens if something happens to it? Well, it's more expensive to fix. It's more expensive to maintain. It's more expensive to insure. And if you're not at a level you can handle that right now, the debt can then make you a servant to the lender, because then you have to go do things you really didn't want to do, or work jobs you didn't want to work in order to pay off this thing. Where if you would follow God's plan, you know what? You would be able to buy that at the time of your life where you can afford it and not have to stress you out. God wants you to have the things you want to have. I want you to have the things you want to have. But I don't want you to be stressed out to the point where you're wondering what's going on. Because debt sometimes, it is necessary, but it only should be used on things that either appreciate in value or things that have a way of bringing money into your life that will give you return. And sometimes when there's an emergency situation, sometimes there's a crisis in life and you have to go to somebody, you have to borrow money. A lot of those things could be a family crisis. A lot of them come with hospital bills. In my church, I have a lot of people that have large hospital bills. In my career, I've done a lot of things with people with that. I actually worked for a guy for 2 years, and they had hundreds of thousands of dollars of hospital bills. They didn't know what to do. And one of the things we got to realize about debt and going into debt and paying things off is the first thing you got to do before you decide to do anything about paying something or going into debt is stop and ask God and relax. Or bring someone else in to advise you. Because, when we're stressed and we're panicked in crisis situations, we make the worst decisions of our life. And because people come around, they don't want to help here, don't want to help here. But really, these companies, they just want to take your money. There's these things online that we can consolidate your debts and do all that. But then there's a price tag upon that. And they make it sound so good. But then when you do the whole math, it's like, wait, maybe that's not the best way out of this situation. Actually, one of the worst mistakes people make is panicking over a large medical bill. And they can be unbelievable. But a couple of things you need to understand about before you panic about something like that. Let me tell you, there's a few things in the law that talk about things. Here's one thing most people don't know. As long as all medical companies are required by law that if you can't afford to pay it, to work with you to set up a payment plan with no interest charge, and it doesn't affect your credit. Now, they're not going to tell you that up front because what? They want their money, right? They want the money up front. But the law says that as long as you're paying, these are medical bills only. I'm not talking about car payments and house payments. Now, there are plans for that too. If you have questions about that, you're more than welcome to ask me about that. But you can ask for a payment plan. And as long as you're paying something on it, it will not affect your credit. And the medical institutions are required to work with you. Now sometimes, and here's another thing, sometimes they'll even give you a discount. Most people get a bill and people just accept the bill. What's the Bible say? You have not because you ask not. Let me tell you a couple stories in my life. A couple years ago, my wife had to get a heart monitor, and she's fine. Don't worry about that. Just we had a little rhythm thing, and everything's fine now. But we got the bill for it, and the insurance we had at the time had a higher deductible, and the thing came in at a little over $1,900 and some dollars. It's a big bill. Now I had $1,250 a month. I mean, I called and I said I'll make a payment plan. I didn't have the $1,900 right there and then in that account because I didn't want to affect my other accounts. And so I just called him. You know what? And I was honest with him. Here's the deal. You got to be honest. If you're honest, God always honors honesty. Some people sometimes will try to hide their situation so they can get a better deal. Don't do that. Because here's the deal. God knows. And you might get a deal from somebody on earth, but you know what? God, He sees everything. And you got to make account for that. Always be honest. So I called him up. You know what I said? I think this is a little high for all that it did. And I said, here's my situation. Here's what I do. Here's what I can afford to pay and all that. And they said, well, we'll get back to you. You know what they called back? They called back and they said, hey, you know what? We'll work it out with you. Long story short, I ended up instead of paying $1,900, I ended up paying $800. Just because I asked. You know what? I didn't ask for a discount. I just said, hey, can you look into it? And you know what? People do that. And another time I was in it was August of 2014. I had to get my CDL. I had a CDL, but in Maryland I had to get a sleep test because I have sleep apnea, so I keep my CDL and drive the bus for the church. And so I went and got a sleep test, and I had even worse insurance then because I got the sleep test back. Sleep test cost me $2,068. Insurance paid $25. Yeah, that means I owed over $2,000 to this thing. And I said, you know what? I had my fund. At that time, I think I had about $500 in it. And so I I went to the hospital and I said, hey, I'm not going to welch on debts, but I have I just told them, hey, this is how I do my funds. I want to make sure I can provide for my family. And I just moved here and I don't really have the extra money for this. I want to set up a payment plan. What's the best you can do? And they said, well, you got to fill out this form. So I filled out this form, and they said, we'll get back to you. And the bills kept coming, and I called and said, oh, don't worry about the bills yet. We're still working on how we're going to do it. And as long as you're in communication with the company, with the medical industry, they can't report to your credit, and it can't affect you adversely. The key is communication. Sometimes people just take a bill and put it to the side and forget about it. That's not the same thing. And in long story short, in early November of 2014, I called them, and they said, yeah, we've come to the conclusion of the case, and we're going to send you a letter about what you owe. And I said, okay, that's great. I waited a month, and the letter came. So I called back in December of 2014 and said, hey, I haven't got the letter yet. Hey, I'm willing to pay. Whole time I said I was willing to pay it, whatever it was. I wasn't arguing with them. I wasn't trying to beat them down. I was just being honest with them. And the lady on the phone says, oh, I'm sorry you didn't get your letter, but I can read it to you. I said, oh, great, you can read it to me. And she says, dear Mr. Wintermeyer, we have decided to write your entire bill off. All because what did I do? I simply asked. And what I did is I stopped when I got the bill. I prayed to God, and God gave me, he just said, hey, why don't you just go ask? If they say no, hey, I owe the money anyways, right? But if they want to on their own take it off. I didn't go and say I demand a disc. People people demand things. You know what? When it comes to this type of stuff, when you have a debt, you have a debt, and God says we have to pay off our debts. But it doesn't mean we can't ask questions and see things like that. Now, an example of some good debt. Good debts are long-term investments. Everybody wants to buy a house. And a house can be a great investment. If you hold a house for 20 or more years, rarely does a house go under. There might be times where the market goes up and down, but typically a house always appreciates in value eventually. Now the problem is if you buy a house and then 3 years later you move to another house, that's when the problems come because, the first 10 years and you buy a house, the first 10 years you pretty much don't pay anything on the house. It's pretty much all interest. It's very little equity that you get in the house. And they set that up because the bank wants to get their money first before you actually start paying on the house. But what you also got to understand is a lot of people think there's a 30-year mortgage and that's it. Well, you know what? There's a lot of mortgage plans out there. Just so you know, the worst one is now they have a 40-year mortgage plan. Then you got 15 years before you start paying on your house. Please don't do that. If you want suggestions on that, I'm going to give you two I like. There's the 15-year plan. You pay a little more up front, but you get into the equity a lot faster. Or it's called a biweekly plan, where you pay every other week. And at the end of the year, you'll pay, instead of paying 12 months, you'll pay 13 months, which means your last payment will all go towards principal. And if you do that on a 30-year mortgage, you'll pay your mortgage off typically in 21 years instead of 30 years. That's a really nice way to do it. And that's something we could go into. If somebody wants to talk about mortgages one night, we can do that, and buying a house. But here's the deal. You got to think about long-term, what's a good investment and a bad investment. Some people want a house, and they go buy it, and then they find out that it's not what they wanted. But then you try to sell it, you're actually upside down because you don't have any equity in it. Because a lot of people will say, "Oh, if you got 3%, we'll get you into that," or these 0% down things, and they all sound great. The problem is if you want one of those, you're going to keep it for 30 years. It's great, but if you're in a job that's going to move you every 3 years, a 0% down means you're going to end up paying somebody else to buy your house, most probably, because houses don't typically appreciate that quickly in value. It's a long-term investment. Sometimes, and just like buying a house, you want a house, hey, it's great. It's a great goal to have. Like anything else, before you go into debt, pray about it, ask God about it, and take your time. I can tell you people bought a house and they say they wish they never bought that one. You know what? When you go out with real estate agents, their job is to what? Sell you a house, okay? But you got to say, hey, God, what's the house for me? We talked about everything comes down to if you want your money to be right, let God be your partner. Let God be your guiding in that. My wife and I, we bought a house in Texas. And we had a real estate agent. She was really happy I don't know if she was happy to get rid of us, but I'm sure she was not unhappy when we finally bought the house. Typically, the average person, how many houses the average person looks at when they buy a house? 3. That's the average. And it's because they find this is the perfect house for you, and then what do they say? You can afford this house based on your income, but you need to do research. What if it's in a high tax neighborhood? What if it's in a floodplain neighborhood? That'll affect your insurance cost. You do the inspection and there's a lot of problems. A lot of people buy houses, they only do an inspection. It's like crazy. You always do an inspection. Because you know what? You don't want to buy something that's going to cost you more than your investment. You always want to make money in your investment. And so my wife and I, we looked at 40-some houses before we bought our first house in Texas. And not our first house. The first time we bought a house, we did the 3-house thing, and we paid for it dearly. We ended, because we're a pastor, we move a lot. And we ended up being about $5,000 upside down when we moved. But then we moved to Texas, and we were planning to be there a long time. We were there for 6 years. And then God moved us on. And the interesting thing is, early in the process, we saw a house that we really loved in the neighborhood we wanted to be in. But the price was right at the ultimate that we could afford. And I was like, but no, God, I really want to be at this number. If God puts a number in your heart, He will. He talks to you. Yes? Oh, I thought you were waving at me. And you know what? He'll put a number in your heart. Or he'll put a neighborhood in your heart. Or put something. You know what? If God did that, sometimes you just got to wait a little while. When it comes to making a big purchase, don't be in a hurry to make it, because then you'll make a lot of mistakes. Well, we looked at this one house across the street. It was $164,900. It was everything we wanted. It had 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, it would grow the family. I'd have an office and all this. It was great. But we didn't pull the trigger on it. Because everything was right but the numbers. And it was like, all right, whatever. And so we kept looking at other houses. Now, this process took us about 2 months. We kept looking at houses every week. It was kind of like the weekly thing. Thursday, we're going to go out to the realtor. And I don't think the realtor was wondering if she's ever going to make money on us. And then a house right across the street, literally right across the street, went up for sale. It was an old couple who was retiring. And they just wanted to retire. And they put their house on the market for $30,000 less than the house across the street. It was exactly the number we wanted to pay. And we bought the house. It was the neighbor we wanted, the taxes we wanted. The neighbor across the street didn't like us because we ruined their values. But that's okay. And the interesting thing, God knew that I was going to be there 5-6 years. And in the 6 years, you know what happened? Because I bought so far under value for the market, the tax people came out and asked me what I paid for it. Says, no way you paid that. Yeah, it's what I paid for it. And when I left, I was able to make money on it because I got it below that. Because God, He wants you to have the things you want. But you know what? Trust Him and let Him guide you when you do that. Another good debt is if you're in business. Sometimes people go into business for themselves. It could be a small business, it could be a big business. Maybe you want to buy a piece of machinery or buy another building. How do you make that decision? Well, here's how you make that decision. A lot of people want to buy, or even churches. Sometimes we make decisions based on, things like that. Debt is not always bad. Here's where debt is bad. You buy something and you have no idea if it's going to return value on you. Okay? If your business is going well and you want your business to expand, okay, yeah, you might buy a machine. You might have to pay some interest on it. Maybe you're paying 8-9% interest on the equipment you're buying. Okay? But what if you project your numbers out and you say, if I buy this machinery, I could bring in this much more business. Will the money in business offset that 9% or make money on it? Well, if that's the case, hey, that's a good thing to buy. But if you're not sure, then maybe you should pull off that. Or if a bigger building will help you out. Sometimes churches want to build a building, and they don't want to go into debt. Well, that's okay. But here's the deal. It takes a while to build a building. And if you want to build it debt-free, it takes a while to raise all the money. And what if the people, you're excited, and after time they don't get excited, then maybe the church attendance goes down, and where if you would have built it right away, you might have got more people in, you're giving more, and would have offset the 6 or 7% building loan you have. So God has a brain. He asks us to use it. He asks us to say, hey, pray about it. A lot of times we go into debt because we haven't asked God about what we should do. It includes churches, includes businesses, includes families. And like I said, you can have things you want, and it's okay to buy those things, but God doesn't want you stressed out. So, ask God about to make sure you're doing the right things. I'll tell you a story about a couple of mine that I had. There was a church of mine in Florida, and they wanted to buy a motorcycle. Nothing wrong with buying a motorcycle. They were in their 50s, and they had lived life, and if you want to buy one, that's great. But they always had money difficulties. So they came in and counseled with the pastor, and they said, so they prayed, and they said the number came to their head. It was 13%. We're willing to pay 13% interest on a motorcycle. Personally, I think 13% for any vehicle is really high. But that's what they prayed about in their heart. Okay, so they went out, they went to a dealership, found the motorcycle they want, and it came back at 13.9% interest. Now, what did God tell them? They felt comfortable at 13%. You know, God will talk to you. Well, they ended up buying the motorcycle because they thought 13.9% was close enough. Well, let me tell you something. That motorcycle ruined their family, ruined their finances, ruined some relationships because they put in a place where they had to borrow money from people, and then they couldn't pay people back because they had to dip into their survival and their basic needs. You know what? Hey, you know, I think 13% was way too high, but you know what? God knew what the number was going to be at the dealership, so he gave them a number. Trust God. Let God help you in making good decisions, because you don't want to be in a place where you're always running after things in your life. Because eventually, 4 minutes left. Oh, okay, wow, okay. I might go a little longer. So eventually, I'd like for all of you to be in a position to help someone else. But like I said, almost all Americans have some type of debt. So I'm going to end it next time we'll talk about how to make free money on credit, and I'll give you some ideas how to either improve your credit score, or if you have bad credit, how to get that fixed. Because there's this thing called I have to look up it here. The Fair, just give me a second here. The Fair Credit Reporting Act, and it'll help you in terms of how to get out of debt, things like that. One thing I will counsel you is, before we go on, is you need to monitor your credit. You might think you're good at it. You might think you're not good at it. It doesn't matter which way it is. You should always know what's going on, because just so you know, the credit reporting machine out there and the debt reporting machine out there, it is a machine. It is not a person. It's an algorithm. And sometimes you might find things that you don't know about. There's a website called creditkarma.com. It's absolutely free. I use it. I check mine once a month. And because you never know what might happen, might be on there. Sometimes people are evil, okay? And they'll do things, and you'll find things that aren't yours. And I'll walk you through, if you find something on the report, of how to get rid of it. If it's 7 years older, I can walk you through that too. So if you want to go on there and you see something, ask me a question. I asked Kyle earlier if I could use him as an example. He wanted to start applying for credit in his life. He's almost 24. And I said, well, let's just check your credit. And he went on. And, once you hit the 20s, people watch it. We're in a digital age, folks. Just the way it is. And we went online, and his credit score, one score was good, the other score wasn't good. And we looked on, and he had a debt on there that he didn't know about. And they were reporting to you. Here's the bad thing about it. When you have a debt, and they can go after you, but they're sneaky, and they'll do things. And it was a debt he didn't know about. And it was only $12, and it dropped his score from the other score 60 points. Just over a $12 credit thing. He didn't know about it. And come to find out that the bill got thrown away he never saw, and now he's working on it. And once you pay it off, it'll help your thing get back up. But we'll talk about strategies next time, because I want to help everybody to have, credit scores is part of life, and it's good to have a good one. So when you have an emergency, you can actually get money if you need it. And also, when you get in life, when you're at a point when you have your budget and your free money going well, you'll be able to get the things that you want to and not be stressed about it. You'll be able to make good decisions and not bad. But one thing I want to stress before I leave tonight is Proverbs 11:15. The one thing that God does say about debt that you never ever do. It says, "He who is a surety for a stranger will suffer, but one who hates being a surety is secure." What God is saying here is, He's saying surety means that you are guaranteeing a loan for somebody else. Okay? And God didn't say, and what God says here, He says, you will suffer, not suffer. God says, never co-sign for someone else. Now, it doesn't mean you can't loan somebody money, but let me give you a couple examples. Because, most commonplace this happens is with children, family, and close friends. Okay? Hey, will you do this for me? I've had people ask me this my whole life. You know what? I never co-sign for anybody. Because here's what will happen. Once you co-sign with somebody, your relationship with your kids, your family, or your close friends, it will change. Guarantee you it will change. And here's why. Because you come together, and typically when you have children, family, and close friends, there is no written agreement between it. Why? Because they're family, children, or close friends. Okay? And what happens is you have an expectation of what they should do to protect your credit. They have different expectations of what they need to do for you. And there's never really a meeting of the minds. And what happens is it will affect you in different ways. Now, when it comes to children and family and friends, sometimes people might need your help. And you know what? Especially when it comes to your children, we should always do what we can to help them. Okay? And vice versa. When your parents get older, hey, you should be ones to help provide for them in their old age. It works both ways. But don't co-sign. Here's a good example is a car. A lot of times parents will co-sign for a kid for a car. It's not because the kid doesn't have a lot of credit. Why? Because they're young. You know, a good example is Kyle. You know, but his credit's going to be improved. I gave him some ways to improve it. Maybe by December he'll be able to show you how I told him his score will go up 100 points if he does what I asked him to do. Are you doing it? All right, good. And we'll have a real life example for you. But you know, you want to help them. But here's the deal: if you want to help your kid get a car, okay, because they don't have credit, I understand that. But there are simple ways for a kid who's young. That could be 20s, 30s, just getting into credit or have bad credit to restore their credit. I will talk to you about ways to do that to get their credit up. But here's the deal: if you co-sign for a car, and the kid has the car, and the kid stops paying on the car, you might not know about it. What happens? Now you have a ding on your kid's credit and on your credit, and you might not know for a couple payment plans. Okay? Now, another reason why you need to have Credit Karma, because you need to, hey, trust me one thing, bill collectors, they don't mess around with reporting things. Okay? Just let you know that. But that's good because then you know when things are happening. But here's the deal: if you co-sign for the car, then say something goes wrong, your credit's affected, your kid's credit affected. So what happens later on, say a year or so later, something happens, but now you don't have the ability to go out and get an emergency loan because your credit got dinged and you can't help your kid out. It hurts you, doesn't it? Or hurts your family member or your friend out. It'd be much better for you in that situation is if you want to help them out, if you're going to do it that way, take the loan out in your name only. Now here, there's a couple things for you. Like say it's a child or a family member. You know, hey, if they're not paying for the car, here's the deal: you're paying for the car, and now they have to pay you. Well, you'll know when the loan's not being made because no money will be coming to you. Okay, all right. And so you'll have you might be able to go 1 or 2 payments, give them a little break in that, so they don't have to ruin now their credit's not being ruined. You're covering them, but you also know that where the status is. You know, and never take a loan out that you can't afford, and never co-sign for anything that you do. We'll talk about that first up next time. Is it okay to loan money? Yes, but never go into your survival funds or your basic needs funds, and we'll talk about it next class because we're running out of time. But here's the other thing: what if the family member or kid or friend can't pay for the car? Well, if you own the car, if you're the loan person, what can you do? You can sell the car. And you can get out of the bad debt. Yeah, they might need the car, but here's the deal. If they're on the loan, they have rights to it too. And here's the deal. Both credits get destroyed. It'd be better for them to learn a lesson and lose the car, because they come repossess the car. Now you're in another whole ball of worms. Okay? And you don't want to have that too. You want to have control. You always want to have control over, if you're going to go into debt, you make sure you have control over it. You don't want to be the servant to the lender. You want to have control in the situation. And they'll teach your child hey, they lost a car, okay, but teaches them some responsibilities for the next time. And at the same time, your child's credit, which is already young, does not get what? Ruined. And yours doesn't get ruined because you acted on it before it was too late. And this can apply to a lot of different things. The Bible is very, very clear about that. And next time we'll talk about how to get credit, use credit successfully, improve your scores, about how you can go on a free vacation, and then what's the proper way to loan and not loan money? Because a lot of people don't understand. Because sometimes, you know what? It's okay to say no. And it's very important to do that, because you know what? Because here's the deal. Sometimes we loan to people money, and if we don't pray to God and ask if we should do it, you know what happens? We don't help them. We actually hurt ourselves, and then we hurt them because they don't pay us back, and then we have to borrow for something, and then this whole cycle goes on. But we'll talk about it next time. So I hope you enjoyed tonight. Sorry we couldn't do it live tonight. We'll be back on October 29th at 6 p.m. Thank you so much.